Welcome to this fourth installment of Getting Native, the place where we transform front yards into beautiful Californian and Mediterranean native gardens. Last week, the emphasis was on irrigation as Susan Jett spoke with David Simpson, our irrigation expert, about drip irrigation. We also got to see the installation of the mow strip between Gary and Crystal's and their next door neighbor. Susan and Frank also talked about penstemon, one of my favorite plants. In this episode, we watch while Mark's crew pours the concrete for the new walkway.
California. And yesterday we left off. Marcelo was finishing off the forming and getting everything ready for the pour this morning. So it looks like we're getting pretty close to finishing on this, right?
Yes, as you can see this morning, we did pour the concrete, and it is all down. What the guys will do now is go through and just do a process of getting it semi-finish for the next step, which Joel will come in and put his topping on.
So we have Joel is going to come and put a separate finish on the entire concrete.
He'll blend everything in together. He'll spray a topping on this, giving it a texture and a color that you folks have already picked out, and we'll just give him kind of the sub base for that.
Okay.
And this is what we're doing right now.
So now, for this mix, was this a special mix, or is this what
No,
kind of mix is it?
this was pretty much a standard force act that we would pour for all sidewalks.
Okay.
Nothing special for it. So
Okay.
but we just again, just making sure that we have the right pitches and setups for fall on drainage and so forth. So.
Okay, so the runoff will sheet back into the planter beds.
Back into the planter areas.
Yeah.
We won't have any ponding or puddling anywhere, and so. Yeah, I think we're in good shape for the next step.
Great. Well, we look forward to seeing the next step now.
The rock is delivered, and Forrest's crew begins placing it as detailed in the plan.
The concrete is curing now, Forrest, and it's time now to start setting in these boulders. These are from a local source, right?
Right, they're from a local wash where they take the local material and grade it and have it for people to use.
So we're going to use these to help us change the grade and move from the sidewalk level up to this upper level here. So can you tell us how the guys are working here?
Well, we starting with the largest, hardest to move boulders, and they're actually small enough where a man or two can handle them. And then we dig a little hole and set them in about 1/3 of the way.
1/3 down below the surface.
Right,
Yeah.
so they look kind of natural. You don't want them sitting on the surface.
Yeah.
And just pack a little dirt around them and get the nicest shape possible on the boulder and have it face the way you want.
Face the history, yeah. And you're arranging them in natural groupings rather than in a straight line here.
Right, you wouldn't want it to look like another fencing or something.
Yes, yes. Okay, well, we look forward to getting them in, and we're getting close to planting here.
That would be wonderful to get to that.
He also finishes up installing the valves and running the irrigation laterals to stub outs in each hydrozone. As we have 5 hydrozones, Forrest has installed 5 new pressure-regulated valves, from which he has run laterals to stub outs in each of the hydrozones. Once the plants are in the ground, he will connect the drip irrigation tubing to the stub out. While Forrest and his crew continue with the rock placement, Gary and Crystal visit the Grow Native nursery at the Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden. When you're planning your garden, take as much time as you can to research the plants. Pay a visit to local gardens or an arboretum to see plants growing in different arrangements. Gary and Crystal first paid a visit to the Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden and then to a local nursery to see some of the plants we propose to use.
Hi, how are you? I'm Crystal.
Hi, Crystal.
I'm Gary.
Hi, Gary.
Nice
I'm
to
John.
meet you. My pleasure.
Yes.
John, we're renovating our yard, and we're interested in plants that don't require a lot of water.
Okay.
So I was wondering if you could recommend some.
Oh, we have several that we can recommend. Now, as a matter of fact, that's what we do here at our...
John shows Gary and Crystal some selections of native plants.
Here's another really nice one right here. This one's called Calvicia. That's the botanical name, but it's really called island snapdragon.
Oh, okay.
And it grows naturally on Catalina Island.
Oh.
We just kind of prune these back a little bit because it's summertime now, but when it starts cooling down in the fall, and particularly in the spring, they just get covered with all kinds of red blossoms that attract the hummingbirds also.
Perfect.
So do they look like a normal snapdragon, a little bit different, the flower, or?
The flower looks similar. It's kind of that trumpet-shaped blossom.
Uh-huh.
Maybe
Okay.
that's why it attracts the hummingbirds, and it's
Yeah.
a red flower also.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be good.
And this one right here is the berberis, also called creeping mahonia, or creeping barberry.
Okay.
It's kind of like a ground cover. It grows about 18 inches tall and spreads along the ground. It gets a yellow flower on it that's very pretty in the springtime.
Okay.
Very easy to grow.
This is pretty too, the two-tone sort of
Oh
color.
yeah,
turning
it's
red.
starting to turn kind of reddish now because we're coming into some cooler nights, and particularly in the wintertime, we get all kinds of bronze.
Oh, that'll be
pretty
nice.
on there too.
Yeah, I like that.
Crystal does like her color.
Yeah.
Okay.
She likes a lot of color.
Yeah.
Color and flowers.
Soil functions to provide physical support for plants and to provide water and nutrients to help them grow. It's made up of a mixture of organic and mineral particles, clay, silt, sand, and decomposing organic matter. Between these particles, there are air spaces through which water and gases permeate. Soil can vary in depth, texture, and chemistry. It can be full of rock and gravel, or it can be sticky and full of clay. Its color can be dark or light. Its structure can be light or heavy. Soil texture is generally classified according to its clay, silt, and sand content. Clay soil feels similar to Play-Doh when you rub it between your fingers. Under magnification, the particles are small and plate-shaped. Because the particles are so small, there's not much airspace between them, and as a result, water drains very slowly through clay soils. Here, you can see what happens when you add water to clay soil. What's important to note is that it tends to spread out laterally, and it drains slowly, spreading wider and wider as it percolates. When they are dry, clay soils are typically hard and rock-like. Clay soils compact easily, can be difficult to cultivate, but overall tend to be fertile. A simple test that you can conduct is to take a fistful of your garden soil, moisten it with a little water so you can form a fistful of soil. Now open your fist and poke the ball of soil with your finger. Clay soil does not break up easily when you do this. Sandy soil feels gritty when you rub it between your fingers. That's because the sand particles are much larger than clay. The particles can range in size from fine sand to something that resembles small pebbles. Sandy soils also have larger spaces between the particles. As you can imagine, the more sand you have in your soil, the faster the water will drain through it. This can be a disadvantage. Not only does it dry out more quickly, but the nutrients get washed out as the water drains. Many Californian and Mediterranean natives grow naturally in fast-draining, low-nutrient sandy and gravelly soils, and therefore adapt well to sandy garden soils. Let's look at a sample of soil from a different garden. When you moisten it and form a fist test, you can see how easily it breaks up when you poke it with your finger. As we can see from this diagram, when you add water to sandy soil, it moves quickly downwards. Unlike clay soil, it does not spread out much as it drains. A third mineral component of soil is known as silt. In size, silt particles are somewhat between clay and sand. Silty soil drains more quickly than clay soils, but slower than sandy soils. It's common in valley soils where rivers have deposited sediment. In a fist test, silty soil behaves something like clay, but it breaks up more easily when you poke it. As you might expect, water moves downward through silty soil in a pattern, somewhere between that of sandy and clay soils. These are just some of the ingredients of garden soil, but it contains many others, such as microbial bacteria and fungi, both beneficial and harmful to plants. Garden soil is like cookie dough. Depending on what type and proportion of flour, nuts, flavorings, and other ingredients, you can end up with many varieties of cookies. Loamy soils contain a good balance of clay, sand, and silt, usually between 10 and 25% clay, giving them good drainage and water retention. It may have a lot of organic matter, or very little. It should contain the right amount of macronutrients and micronutrients for the plants you want to grow. A comprehensive soil test will tell you what you have. Another important test to help you understand your soil properties is a percolation test. Here's how to do it. With a shovel or post hole digger, dig a hole 18 to 24 inches deep. Width is not important. Fill the hole with water to the top and let it drain for several hours. Ideally, let the hole drain overnight. Refill the hole to within a couple of inches of the top. To help you measure, place a stick across the top of the hole and use a second stick to mark the water level. Measure drop in water level after 30 minutes and then again in 1 hour. To determine average drop in water level per hour, less than 1/2 inch per hour, poorly drained and suited to plants that can tolerate periods of saturation. 1/2 inch to 1 inch per hour, moderately well drained and acceptable to a wide range of plants. More than 1 inch per hour, well drained and suited to plants requiring fast drainage, such as those native to chaparral and desert regions. In cases where you do not have well-draining soil and you want to grow plants that need good drainage, you can create a raised planter or mound of well-draining soil to grow your plants in. We can't discuss soils without talking about soil chemistry. Here, we could put on our lab coats and get very scientific, but let's keep it simple. You need 2 pieces of information: the soil pH and the chemical content. The pH tells you whether the soil is acidic or basic. It's measured by a numerical scale where 7 is neutral, less than 7 is progressively acidic, and greater than 7 is progressively basic. The chemical content will tell you the levels of major plant nutrients present. Again, it's a good idea to send your sample off to be tested at a soil laboratory to get a good picture of what you're dealing with. It's an expense that's worthwhile and will answer many questions as you plan your new garden. Test results often come with cultivation recommendations to improve your soil. However, consult with an expert before proceeding, as many natives do not like rich soils. Keep the report on file, as it's a valuable resource if you have plant problems later on. If you can't afford a lab test, you can get an approximate measure of your soil from a simple DIY kit from your local garden store or nursery. One further aspect of soils is the organic matter content. This comes from pieces of root, leaves, and decaying debris and adds nutrients to the soil as it breaks down. Adding organic amendments or mulch results in improved soil structure and fertility. Once you know your soil's texture, pH, and nutrient level, how do you use this information for your native garden? There's not one right answer to this question, but some plants prefer well-draining soil with low nutrients, like sandy soil. Others, a rich soil with plenty of moisture and organic matter, like clay or loamy soils. Select plants based on your soil type. For example, your soil is sandy and well-draining. Choose natives that enjoy this kind of environment. If your soil is heavy and slow-draining, choose plants that come from riparian and woodland environments, or that can tolerate moist soils high in organic matter. When planting most natives from dry environments such as chaparral, avoid organic amendments and mulches. However, it is good to add organic amendments and mulches to soil where you are planting natives from woodland and riparian environments. California lilacs come in many forms. Let's listen in as Bob Perry, landscape architect and author of a number of books on California natives, talks about some of his favorite selections.
We're really fortunate today to have with us Bob Perry, who's a landscape architect and a really wonderful author of books on native plants and on drought-tolerant plants. And they're always my favorite. And so we're glad to have you here, Bob.
Thank you, Susan.
And so today we're going to talk a little bit about ceanothus.
That's right. It's one of my favorite plant groups in California. It's a plant group that's indigenous to North America with about 50 species, of which 41 are found in California and are well adapted to many parts of our state.
Yeah.
And I selected this group because I find within it so many choices for landscape uses, particularly at a residential scale, that I'd like to just talk about today.
Yeah. Well, we have a few here. You want to tell us about this one?
Yes, I've put together a number of plants I'd like to talk about, including this Ceanothus thursiflorus variety, Griseus horizontalis, Yankee Point.
That's a mouthful.
It sure is. And equal to that long name is the success of this plant as a large spreading ground cover. It's one of the plants that will be able to cover large slopes and banks and in that way provide for erosion control on one hand. Characteristic of the Ceanothus are the dark green leaves and the springtime flowers that they just produce in great abundance.
Yeah, and those are blue, right, on
Yes,
this one?
They're very nice deep powder blue, which I find to be stunning, particularly since they cover the whole plant.
Wow, yeah.
And in this sense, looking at it, it shows you a plant that at first, at this point, looks maybe small and undeveloped, but it's a robust grower like most Ceanothus, so don't be put off by the simple sparseness of the appearance at this point.
Well, now this is a Ceanothus. It looks very small. Does it stay small?
No, it doesn't. This is a wonderful sprawling plant that will grow very quickly like most Ceanothus do and cover actually 12 to 15 feet in width, grow 3 to 4 feet in height.
Wow.
And again, is a choice that we might consider for large banks, slope areas, put in the background, and used particularly for the seasonal flowering that occurs in early spring. A light blue flower covers this plant. It's long and cylindrical, perhaps
And
2 inches.
What's its name?
This is Ceanothus Joyce Coulter. It's one of my favorite. I use it a lot in landscaping because I find it very garden tolerant and highly adaptable.
Yeah, we've used that at the garden here, and it is a wonderful plant.
Yes.
And so then you have something that, again, doesn't look so great in the container, but you want to tell us about that?
Yes, I've selected this plant because I find it to be one of the premier mounding shrubs that will grow 6 to 8 feet tall, 8 to 10 feet wide, and produce deep purple-blue flowers in the spring. And it's a large, large mound. And so when we think about background areas or on slopes or mixed native plantings, this Ceanothus concha, as it's known, is one of the premier plants, introduced in the late 1940s, early 1950s.
Wow.
Spectacular choice.
So what sorts of insects do these plants attract?
Well, they attract a wide variety, and without being too specific on that, what we generally find is they invite the beneficial types of insects that we would hope to have in our garden for just diversity in that regard too, because that's sometimes our best defense and approach to dealing
pests.
with avoiding pests.
Yeah, and this one has a very different leaf type.
It does, and some people might be able to look at it and understand from the beginning that this actually has some good drought tolerance by having small leaves and therefore a smaller surface area to lose moisture. This Ceanothus dark star is perhaps considered to be the most stunning and colorful of all Ceanothus cultivars, and is a large mounding shrub, 8 to 10 feet tall, similar in width. And this is a remarkably healthy and robust specimen, growing in a deep 1-gallon container, so its root system will not be constricted at this size and age, and it's really ready to go in the ground and to just start growing immediately.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It really is.
And that's a real deep blue, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It's I call it purple blue, very much so.
And then I noticed that we have two that you told me were the same, but they look so different. Could you tell me about this?
Well, I can. This is our largest ceanothus, the Ceanothus Ray Hartman, a plant that's capable of growing into a tree 25 feet tall,
Wow.
equal in width. If we don't train it as a tree, it's a large shrub of that size, but its capacity to grow that large makes it very desirable as a single trunk or a low branching tree. Allows you to put other plants underneath it for a nice design composition, and by and large is a plant with large clusters of flowers, 5 inches in size, where multiple flowers just group together, deep medium blue, and a plant that most people consider to have almost the highest garden tolerance of any that we've just talked about.
Yeah.
Now, one point to stress here is you go to a nursery and you have a choice of selecting one or the other for your garden.
Well, this one's bigger.
Well, it certainly is bigger, but it's common to what happens where larger plants often are in small containers, and therefore the roots tend to get crowded, root bound, and very often you take a plant like this, put it in the ground, and it never recovers from those early stages of root coiling and development like that.
So this would make a better choice.
This would make a better choice. It will grow even faster than this will and become better established over time.
So if I'm looking between a 1 gallon and a 5 gallon, what should I go for?
Well, with ceanothus, for as quickly as they grow and large as they become, I always go for the 1 gallon. Very seldom would I recommend a 5 gallon plant in this particular genus of plants.
Yeah, they're really fast.
More information on native plants is available at the Grow Native Nursery, located in the Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden in Claremont, California. Well, what a show. We got to see the walkway get poured and the rock placement. We also learned a lot about soils. Join us again next week as we continue the transformation of Gary and Crystal's front yard.